let's get this show on the road. Hopefully, I'll be able to get you guys out of here a little early. I want to give you some time to prepare for your midterm. So let me make sure that we're still. Just letting a few people in. All right. So this is part 2 of chapter 10. We're still talking about the interview process. And I want to pick up where we left off. We talked about the interview, and I think we got to the point of a panel interview and different types of interviews. We're going to dig just a little bit deeper to talk a little bit more about the process of interviewing and some techniques of what you can do during the interview. If you are in person, and I know I said, from the moment that you pull into the parking lot, you're at the interview. Try to arrive before your appointment time, specifically because if you've never been to that job site, you don't want to get lost. You don't want to get the buildings confused. Nowadays, it may not be necessary to go there first. Like, back when I was first looking for a job, the advice would be to physically go to the site so you know where it is, so you can kind of map out how long it takes. With GPS and everything like that, maybe you don't need to do that, but you do want to take into account the time of day that your interview is. We all know if it's during the morning time, anything can happen because a lot of people are late for work and accidents happen, construction. If it says 30 minutes, I don't know if I would do 30 minutes. I still would probably do 45 minutes to an hour just to make sure that I get there on time, right? Because you just don't want to be late. It's not a good look. Even when I was associate dean and I was interviewing an instructor to work for me, the person was a great professor, but he was late, and by the time he got there, he was flustered, he was sweating. And if anyone knows Florida weather, like we all do, sometimes it's hard to like calm yourself down if it's really hot outside. The sun is no joke. I felt so sorry for this professor. He was an English professor, because, I had to bring him water, and everybody's kind of looking at him because he's sweating profusely just because he got lost. Like, and clearly he did not get the job. And I would like to think it wasn't because of that, but I wasn't the final decision maker. But, it was a bad first impression. So, arrive on time, know where you're going, saying, oh, sorry, I got stuck in traffic. Like, no one wants to hear that, because the expectation is that you give yourself enough time so those things don't happen, right? So again, first impression is a lasting impression, and it's human nature to judge. So we just want to try to eliminate those possibilities. Also, make sure you understand what the company's protocol is. This is something else I try to get from the HR person. Like, if there's a number I should call, if there's a parking pass, do I need to check in with security? Because all of those things will need to be factored into how long I need to give myself to show up somewhere. So you really want to make sure that you ask those questions. Sometimes the screener or the person that you're going to interview with, they forget to tell you those things. You'd be surprised. Sometimes the screener will forget to tell you the person's first and last name. Don't just say, oh, you're going to meet with Manager Taylor, and then there's like 2 Taylors at the company. So make sure you get the person's full name, who you're going to meet with, what the address is there any protocols, just you have to be proactive in that. Now, if you do a virtual interview, you know, yeah, you don't have to worry about compute time, but what do you do have to worry about? You have to worry about technical difficulties, which can be equally embarrassing. If you're fumbling around, you don't know how to use the technology, maybe you're only used to Microsoft Teams and they're like, yeah, but we want to meet on Google, or yeah, we have our own system. And because you have Microsoft Teams, but now you have to log out of your Teams and log into their Teams, and you're fumbling around and you didn't get it early, and you're glitching on your system. None of that's a good look. So you have to make sure you practice log on early, make sure you're there. Don't let them wait for you. You wait for them. Like, even with technical interviews, it can be, a bad look if you don't look prepared, right? So prior to the virtual interview, you want to make sure, a second, just letting people in. You want to make sure that, you have all the documents they've given you, that they've told you to fill out beforehand. If they have, make sure that your resume is right. I tend to have my resume alongside me when I do a virtual interview, just in case they want to ask questions about it. And I make sure I have the job description up in case they start speaking from the job description. So I'll be ready to go and I won't have to flip around and look for things, you know. So again, it's really about just being as prepared as possible. If anybody's going to look unprepared, let it be them. We all know that sometimes the interviewer looks unprepared, right? They don't have their questions ready. They're glitching around. They're running late. Let them look unprepared. We don't want to look unprepared. If it's a phone interview, you know, that, like I said, can be the hardest of them all because there's no face to face. You can't read a person's expressions. You don't know if they're, really excited about talking to you or if it's, they're just going through the motions. But either way, you want to be ready. Make sure you're not on another call. Make sure you answer. Don't let it ring, 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 and ring. Almost pretend as if you're at an interview. Don't be distracted and doing other things and running around the house. A lot of times people think that those things don't come through, but they do. Can you tell the difference between someone that has your undivided attention when they're on the phone and when they don't? Can you tell the difference? By thumbs up, let me know, right? People can still read energy even when it's through the phone. Don't try to take interviews when you're driving. Like, pull over to the side of the road. you know, People can tell, it always amazes me how I guess people feel. I don't know what they're thinking, but you just don't want unnecessary, strikes against you. Like, you're trying to apply for something that you applied for, that you want. So remember, you're not the only person that's interviewing, and you want to make a good impression. You don't want the interviewer to have any type of negative thoughts about you, so make sure that you just be mindful of those things. I know most of it sounds, you know, obvious, but trust me, everything I've said to you has happened in an interview that I've interviewed someone. So you really just don't want to be that person. Now, with a video interview, getting back to that again, there's different forms. There's Zoom, there's Teams, there's Skype, there's Google. It requires a webcam. Hopefully, most of us have webcams or microphones and an internet connection, right? You want to make sure that you have access to those things. It may require you to download software. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where a company goes, "Oh, we use such and such. I'm going to send you the link and you can just download it." I'm like, what in the world? That has happened to me before. So Make sure you read their email that they may send you ahead of time all the way through, just because you don't want any surprises, and try to get help. Like, I wouldn't ask the interviewer unless there's like a password or something. Oh, I don't know how to do that. Can you show me? Like, don't do that. Ask someone else that you know. You just don't want that impression at all. I know it may seem a bit unreasonable, but trust me, if a person doesn't know you, the only thing they know about you is what you show them. And so why even show them that? You don't want to be the only person that didn't know how to download the software, right? Now, when it comes to the questions themselves, we talked a little bit about general questions, and that was pretty obvious. But I'm going to dig a little deeper, and this is something that is not as obvious unless you have, been exposed to it before. When I tell you that they're going to ask you questions about your resume, or they're going to give you these hypothetical questions about the job itself, here's what is really happening. The questions that they're asking you, even if they don't know themselves, because remember, hiring managers are, they're welders, they're technicians, just like you. So they don't have a degree in HR. So they may not even know the categories of the questions that they're asking, but I'm about to tell you what those categories are. Most questions fall within two different categories outside of general. One's behavioral and one's stress. So typically you'll know the difference based on how the question is being presented. Either the question is designed to see how you would behave in a situation, or the question is designed to see how you handle stress. I see a hand up. Do you have a question? I'm at,
Yeah, it says the content can't be displayed for me right now.
is anyone else not seeing my content? Great, thumbs up if you can see it. Okay, I meant you may have to log out and log back in because we're
No problem. I'll be right
cloud-based.
back.
Okay,
I'll be
so,
right back. I got you.
all right. So, again, we know the general questions. Just to recap really quickly, tell me about yourself. And I know some people are like, yeah, I hate that question I read from yesterday. What jobs have you had? Why are you interested in this position? What do you want? Why do you want to work for this company? What is your major strength? And let me surmise all of this into one answer. Like I stated before, the way I answer these general questions is the reason why I'm here, because that's the basic thing, right? Why are you here, right? That's what they really want to know. Is I've always had an interest in this type of work. Let me tell you how that interest first started, and it led me to you. That's the bottom line. What I want to do led me to this position, and this position is in alignment with my future goals. That is the most critical point. Why is that important to them? Because they want to make sure you're not job hopping. They want to make sure like you're not just taking their job because you need to pay your bills, which could all be true, right? Who's not taking a job to pay their bills? And sometimes you have to take jobs because, things happen. But of course, they're going to look out for themselves, and they want to make sure that, okay, do I want to spend the time to train this person, show them everything, because training costs money, to only have them leave in the next year, or they're planning on going to Alabama next year because they're getting married. Like, so sometimes they're gonna try to see what's up with you by asking these questions. So you got to be careful. Like, even if you are going to Alabama next year, don't mention that, because that can cost you the job, right? The only thing that you want to say Is this job, however you frame it, is in alignment with where I am in life? That's it, so make it all go back to them. It's almost like you're stroking their ego a little bit, but you want to put them, at ease, and let them understand that, listen, hey, I'm here because I want this job. This job is in alignment with my career. That's bottom line, right? Now, the other questions are going to fall, like I said, into two categories. Ahmed, I'm assuming you can see now. I think I got a thumbs up. I'm assuming that was you. They're okay, good. They're either going to be behavioral type questions, which typically are designed to see what you've done in the past, because behavior is past, right? So it'll start with a how. Tell me about a time when you've done something. How have you done something? They want to see past examples of your behavior. Tell me how you dealt with multiple projects when you were coming up against a deadline, which may sound like a stress question, but most stress questions are futuristic, and we'll get into that in a minute. You know, and typically, those stress questions are framed under the auspice of you working for them, because then they want to know, okay, so let me put you inside the company. And now I want to know, what would you do if, right? But a lot of the behavioral questions are, what have you done in the past? Now, how do you answer these behavioral questions? Well, the main thing is very similar to how you would write your resume. I call it PAR, P-A-R, problem, action, result. Think of a problem. What was your action? And what were the results? So you're going to go through, like, you don't know exactly what they're going to ask, right? You don't know. But if the question starts with, how did you, right? Or tell me about a time when, you already know it's going to have something to do with the problem, and they're going to want to know what your action was. Now, again, you don't know exactly how they're going to frame that question. So what I do, I just have a couple of examples on deck. So what type of examples do I have? I have a situation where it's a customer, a situation where it's a coworker, and a situation where it's my boss, because you know that what they're going to ask is going to have something to do with either coworker, your boss, or customer, right? And that's what it's going to be. So you can say, okay, did I ever have to deal behaviorally? How did I deal with this? Or tell me about a time I had to deal with a difficult this, or coming up with a tight deadline, or something not working. Let me think of it in terms of that. So how do you answer that? Well, if it's a boss, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be, your boss is asking you to do multiple things, because that happens. And they already know, okay, listen, what are you going to do? Your boss comes to you with multiple different things. How do you answer that question? Well, the best way to answer that is to say, obviously you want to be as truthful as possible with your own personal situation, but they're looking for things like, you're asking for clarifying questions. You're asking for, information on what is more important, which deadline is first. We call it managing up, but you're asking to, the manager to give you more guidance on what they expect from you. So that means, like, you're taking charge of the situation. Yes, Tom, I would love to be able to support you on this project. Can you give me a little bit more understanding on if we want to extend the project I'm doing now? as well as jump on this, or are we going to move some things around, right? They just want to know that you know how to take charge of that situation. If it's a coworker, typically it's going to be some team member that's not performing, and they want to know, how do you deal with that? And that has to do with, they want to know that you're going to go to your team member, try to work it out first, that you're not just going to go run to the boss, but that you're going to try to handle it yourself. You're going to try to go to that person and see what you can do to support them, to get them on task. If it's a customer, obviously they're going to want to know that you know how to, you know, calm the customer down, reassure the customer that things are going to get done, ask clarifying questions, and make sure that you get the job done to make sure that we're meeting their goals. Like that, that's really it, regardless of what position you're applying for. It's going to have something to do with that, something centered around how do you behave when you engage with others. Does that make sense? I know that's kind of a lot, right? When it comes to stress related questions, it's going to be, like I said, a bunch of hypotheticals, and this is going to be more centered around their company. Now, why is this critical? This gives you an insight to what is going on at their company. So make sure you pay attention to those hypotheticals, because those hypotheticals typically are what's really happening at that company. Now, I'm going to tell you, there's been a time when I was like, I don't work for this company. They got problems. Anybody ever interviewed at a company and you're starting to realize, do I really want to get myself involved in this? They they start revealing too much.
Yes.
You Yeah, listen, I've heard people say, oh, they get comfortable with you and they start talking about the person that you're replacing and everything that person did not do. And they want to make sure that you're not that person. To me, is a red flag. Remember, yes, you want a job. Yes, you do. But this is a career. And you don't have to accept everything that comes your way, God willing that you have that ability to, because I know we all have to pay our bills, but you don't want to just take things that aren't in alignment with who you are as a person. Like we all have done that, earlier on, because, we're young. We don't even know who we are as, employees. But as I got a little older, and I know myself and I know how I work and I know what environment I work best in, I've said no to jobs after an interview. I was like, oh, I probably decline working at this company, especially if they're giving me the sense that there's some chaos, or maybe they don't have enough money, or it looks like they're going to close shop, or they could be leaving. Like, you got to really pay attention to what they're saying as well. Remember, the interview process goes both ways. Yes, they're interviewing you, but you're also there to see if this is the right fit for you. So these stress related questions that typically are hypothetical and typically evolve around their company, pay attention. But how are you going to answer them? You're going to answer them pretty much in the same way that you would answer the behavioral type questions. Their hypothetical is going to be what questions? What would you do in this situation? What would you do in that situation? Well, how are you going to prepare for those situations? Well, do your research on the company, do your research on the position. You may not know how that position works specifically in that company, but you know what that position is. Now, if you know somebody at that company, all the better, right? Google is your friend. I would try to Google that company, Indeed and Glassdoor and Reddit. Those are all great places to learn about what it's like to work at that company. Now, no, you don't want to overdo it, because a lot of disgruntled people write on those platforms, but a lot of people that enjoy the company do as well. Your job is not to get a sense of, believe in everything you see. It's kind of like going on a date and, somebody saying, "Ooh, don't date that person," right? You want to see for yourself, but at the same time, you just don't want to go in blind because you may be passing up another position for that position. So you want to make sure that you are saying yes to the right position. Does that make sense? Any questions on stress versus behavioral? The reason why they call it stress, just to talk about that really quickly, is because they're always going to give you a hypothetical where you have to make a decision. And it's always going to be some type of pressure cooker situation. What would you do if you're the VA person, for example, and you had maybe you have to tell the pet owner that you have to put the pet down, but they don't want you to put the pet down. They want you to do everything you can to save Fluffy's life, regardless of the situation, and they're not being okay with it, right? So they're going to give you some crazy, hypothetical like that. Or what would you do if we're a rescue, mission, veterinary mission company, and we may call you at 1 o'clock in the morning. Are you going to, respond? Right? They're going to ask you stuff like that. So whatever type of position it is, trust me, they're going to ask you the most ridiculous thing to see how you would respond. Now, is it that you would say yes to everything? Not necessarily. Like, get through the interview, but that's knowledge for you. Like, well, I can't. What if you can't get up in the middle of the night? What if you have children and go rescue a puppy in Arizona? Maybe that you can't do that, right? So you need to really think about what that company does. You know, the company may do a lot of volunteer work, and I'm still on the VA example, and they may expect you to do volunteer work. We may expect you to do, work at the pet store on the weekends, and you're like, whoa, my friend, I have a part-time job on the weekends. I go to school on the weekends. So make sure that, when they're asking these questions, you're paying attention. Does that make sense? Any questions on that, guys? All right. Now, there are some questions that they cannot ask you. Anytime an interviewer even goes near these questions, it is illegal, right? So, what's illegal? That means that a person can sue you. Yes, people do sue employers that they don't even have yet. People cannot ask you anything that's illegal. They can't ask you about your age, disability, ethnicity, gender, marital status, religion, because and they'll try to too. They'll try to because let's say they want you to work on Saturday or Sunday, and maybe that's a religious thing for you. They'll try to dig into that a little bit. Don't take the bait. They should know better, because if you're in HR, you have to get a lot of legal training, but there's always a few that don't have legal training, and they may ask the wrong questions, or how, oh, didn't you go to high school so and so with so and so? Maybe they're being innocent with it, but maybe they're not being innocent with it. Maybe they're trying to see what age you are. You don't want that drama, because sometimes they do factor that into whether they're going to hire you or not. Some people look older or younger than what they really are, but that's not the point. The point should be, can I do the job? Either you want me for my competence or you don't, right? You don't, so don't dig in. Please don't talk about your family. Don't talk about your family, because you may think that is so innocent, and you don't know how that person on the other side feels about it. Or maybe the person that you're interviewing with is great. Maybe they've seen you in the pickup line at so and so middle school, and they're really innocent, but their boss, who's a workaholic, maybe they're a Elon Musk type that expects you to work 15 hours, and they're like, yeah, Toby, we have middle school kids together, and he's on the soccer team. And then now the boss is thinking, I don't know if I want to have somebody all that time to volunteer. You never know how people think. So just try to minimize. I know we're thinking that we're trying to build camaraderie with the person, but trust me, you just don't know what that person is thinking, and you don't know the person behind them, what they're thinking. So try to minimize any talk about marriage and family and things of that nature. Be polite, obviously, but trust me, I'm telling you from experience, people judge, right? So you don't want them judging you unnecessarily. You want them focused on the position and your abilities. That's it. You want to be polite, but you don't have to answer. I try to steer away from it. If someone says something to me about any of these things, I steer away from it. They may bring, maybe they're just trying to, break the ice and say something, which is nice, be friendly, but just don't engage too much. Some interviewers will, you know, go on and talk a lot, let them talk, but don't talk don't talk back. If you know, guys understand what I mean. Like, be polite, but don't engage. And also remember this: you may have an hour. Sometimes you may see the other person in the lobby that's coming right after you, and you want to try and manage the interview by keeping it short and sweet, even if the interviewer is kind of long-winded, because at the end of the day, they're still going to compare you to that next person. And you don't want your interview to be so off topic because you're trying to be engaging with this person that's talking too much, that none of the key factors about who you are gets talked about. So here you are thinking, oh, you and Sarah had a great interview, but Sarah forgot to ask you 3 questions because you're too busy talking about your kid's middle school game. You're thinking, yeah, I'm in there. But then Sarah meets with another person, and they're talking about how great they are and how efficient they are. And then when Sarah has to go tell her boss about you two, the only thing she remembers about you is that your kid plays middle school. But, John over here has really sold himself on his abilities. So just remember, you're not the only person interviewing for that job, and don't go down that rabbit hole. When it's time for you to ask questions, don't wait till the end to ask questions. Make sure you pepper your questions based on the topic that's being asked. So if you have, and first let me say this, make sure you have prepared some questions. What type of questions do you want to prepare? You want to prepare in questions that have to do with the position in the company, and typically futuristic type questions when it comes to the company. Things like where they're going, something that you've read on their website, something that may be in the news about them. Like, you want to be smart with that, right? You want to have also listened very carefully when they tell you a little bit about that company. And if you have a follow-up question about that company, if they tell you about the company at the beginning, don't ask too many questions, because you want to get into the interview and you don't want to miss your hour. And I'm just saying an hour because that's typically how long an interview is. But if they start talking about the company on the back end, maybe they dig a little bit into the position, and you have some questions prepared, this is your time to start the dialogue, because you don't want it to be robotic. You do want to have a dialogue with the interviewer. You do want to have a rapport with the interviewer, because you want the person to remember you. So the best way to do that is to create the dialogue. So if Sarah starts talking about the company and the reason why that they're hiring somebody is because they just got that new contract from the state, and this position is going to be working alongside the new project team, and you've read about that, go ahead and ask a question, right? Don't wait till the end where y'all move, the interview has moved past that, and then you bring that up when Sarah says, do you have any questions? And then you circle back on that. No, if one of your questions is centered around something that the person brings up, go ahead and ask. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, The other things that you want to ask about is the position itself. Now, you can ask whatever you want. There's no right or wrong. But for me, based on my experience, I'm always asking how long that position has been opened, because I need to know, am I walking into a hot mess? Anybody ever walked into a hot mess before? Me, obviously, I work in, corporate level stuff. I walked into offices and the books were piled high, and that was my mess to clean up. I was like, Lord, I should ask better questions. So you need to know what you're walking into. So you need to know if the person just left, if the person left 4 months ago. Are there going to be any cross training? Are you going to be expected just to jump in and work? Now, you don't want to ask so much that it seems like you're afraid of the job. Ask one or two of those questions, but you definitely want to try to figure out what are you walking into. If you want to work overtime, some people want to work overtime. It's okay to ask, do you guys tend to do, extended hours? Do you have overtime? Because maybe that's what you want. There's a lot of people make part of their income from overtime. Conversely, if you're not interested in that type of work, that's your time to find out. Like, you don't want to frame it like you don't want to do it, but you want to frame it to where you're just being inquisitive. Let's say you're in college, maybe say you have kids. Let's say, what I'm saying, maybe you can't do the overtime. And some companies expect you to do overtime. You want to know what that is, right? You want to know if it's the type of company where it's 5 o'clock and you can go, or they kind of expect you to hang around till 6, even though you get off at 5. You want to know what that is, because maybe your dynamic, your family dynamic does not allow. So part of that is part of the company culture, and it's best to try to figure those things out on the front end, so at least you can prepare for that. I got involved in a situation like that before, and I had to leave the company within 3 months because they told me it was a remote position, and the guy really sold me on it, only to find out after I got there, he quit, and they didn't want the position to be remote at all. They kind of wanted it to be hybrid, but they kind of wanted you to come in because it was one of those that they were coming off of COVID. And, COVID kind of messed everybody up. Everybody was working from home, then they weren't, then they were. In some companies that didn't traditionally have remote workers, they just didn't know what to do with that. Companies that always have remote workers, they already had the infrastructure for that. They already knew what to do. So you're seeing some of that backlash now in the news, just because companies that didn't traditionally have remote work, now they're like, okay, now how do we regroup and bring this back online? So at any rate, they hired me under one auspice, but then when I got there, they're like, oh yeah, we need you to travel here and go there. And I'm like, what? Here's your computer and keys back. No, 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 no. And I had to walk away very quickly, because, you know, what they advertised, what I interviewed for, was not the real deal, and it would have drastically, interrupted my family dynamic. So for me, I couldn't do it. So that's why I tell you, your real life, make sure you try to figure out what that is, because you don't want to waste your time, you don't want to waste their time, and you don't want it to be a bad experience. Any questions on that?
Assuming that an interview is getting a little out of control, when is a good sign that you just need to put your foot down?
So give me an example of what out of control means.
Say that possibly the person you're interviewing with, they themselves goes off topic. What's a polite way to say, let's get back on track?
Oh, yeah, great, great, great point. Typically, what I do, I try to take it back to the conversation at hand. So let's say, for example, like I was just giving you guys an example of when I went to work at a company that wasn't what they said. And let's say you want to bring me back, because sometimes instructors do it too, right? you know, I would just ask a question back to where we are. So if you're at the point of the interview where the person is telling you about your position and they're going off on a tangent about the person before you and why they weren't great, then what I would do, I would ask a question about the position to like bring it back. You know, oh yeah, the reason we have you now because Tommy was always late. Tommy worked in a different town and he couldn't get on time. And, he's supposed to be at this work site at a certain time. And every time we told him, da, 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 da. And I would say, oh yeah, that is the project that you guys just got from the government, right? Like, how is that project going? Or find a way to bring it back to what you're talking about, right? You want to be polite, but in the back of your mind, you want to be like, look, lady, I got an hour. And I know that other guy out there, Toby's waiting to take my job and I want this job, right? So find a way to bring it back. But you can kind of tell the type of interviewer you're going to have. You can tell if it's an interviewer that's going to be shooting that is not experienced in interviewing. And all of that you may think work in your favor. And sometimes it doesn't because, again, you don't know who they report to. Now, if they're the top boss, you would think, okay, they're the top boss. Sometimes that doesn't matter because the top boss may be a little flighty, but the person you're going to be working with, because sometimes you have to meet with the top guy and then the middle guy that's going to be your boss. And the top guy may love you, but the middle guy may be like, okay, you might love him, but I didn't get what I needed from that interview. And I love this guy. And at the end of the day, the top guy is going to be like, okay, well, whoever you need to get the job done. Because remember, your first line supervisor is the one that's going to ultimately make the decision. So try to just keep the conversation focused on you selling yourself. You don't want them to talk so much that you have not given, been given enough time to sell yourself and to talk about your abilities, right? Because at the end of the day, when they ask you questions, they just want to hear how you solved problems, whether it's stress, hypothetical, or behavior. So you want to have a few examples of the times you had to deal with something, what you did, and what the results were. That's the key thing, what you did and what the results were. Whether it's you had to deal with a difficult client, you had to deal with a difficult coworker, you had to deal with a difficult boss. What specific action did you take and what result was that? If it was a coworker, maybe they were showing up late to the job site, maybe you off, or maybe they weren't doing the job well. Maybe you offered to help them. Maybe you offered to give them some training or to sit with them and mentor them and got them on track and you guys were able to finish the project on time. That's the kind of stuff you want to be able to come across, that you know how to get things done, because at the end of the day, this is a business and people are in business to make money. So that's why you're there, to help the bottom line. So everything that you discuss needs to be centered around that, right? So even if they're not professional, you stay professional. What questions to ask and what questions not to ask. Some companies will have the screener tell you how much a job pays right out the gate. Why do they do that? If it's an entry-level job or they have a very tight budget and they don't want to negotiate, they'll say, listen, this job pays this. Before we even go any further, will you be okay with that? If it's a job salary that you like, yes. If it's a job salary that you don't like, you can make the decision right out the gate. Now, again, your personal situation is going to determine whether you take it or not. Obviously, I'm going to caution against taking something that you're not going to be happy with, because you're not going to be happy with the job. If you know you need $25 an hour and this job is $20 an hour, but you need to feed your family, you need to do whatever, you may take it begrudgingly, but sometimes it shows up. Trust me, like, and unless you You can really curtail that, especially when, even though you're not supposed to talk about salary at work, you find out everybody else is making 25, but because the company is doing poorly, they bring you on at 20. It's not going to be a good look, right? So if you have the ability to, financially, and you need $25 an hour, you really want to think about, okay, if I'm going to take this $20 an hour job, can I do that and do it in a way that, still, I'm not going to say keep your professionalism, but you know yourself, right? Other companies are not going to tell you about, typically though, you don't talk about salary until the final interview. Why is that? Well, number one, do you really know if that job should pay $20 an hour or $25 an hour? You don't really until you talk to the company. What they put in the job description, we all know may not actually be what you're doing. So part of you in the interview is you're trying to figure out, okay, Sarah, you say the job is this. You're going to ask clarifying questions when Sarah starts talking about that job description, because it's going to give you an insight to what you're actually doing. Getting back to my VA example, if the We Love Animals clinic expects you to jump in the car and go to Alabama to pick up to pick up animals, yeah, are y'all gonna pay me for that? Like, what we doing? Are we volunteering? Like, what does that look like? You may want to factor that into what you're going to ask for in terms of salary, especially if you've seen like a salary range in the job description. If the company's asking you to maybe work 2 projects, now they said 1 project on the job description, but you're getting in there and Sarah's talking about, yeah, we're going to need you to, finish out this project and work this other one at the same time. And maybe she says something about, you're also going to have to lead the project team. That wasn't in the project description. So, and they've given you a salary range. Oh, this salary pays from $18 an hour to 27. Okay, so you about to get the high end of my ask if you're asking me to lead a team and that was not in the job description. So you don't want to set your expectations on salary until you've spoken to them. They're not going to set their expectations on salary until they've spoken to you, because maybe you have more experience than what your resume says, or maybe you have less experience. So that's what they're also trying to ascertain. So that's why you don't really talk about salary towards the end, to where you both have a better experience, understanding about what the person is bringing to the table and what they are expecting of you. Does that make sense? Sometimes they won't even tell you what they are willing to pay. They'll put it in an offer, right? Remember, an offer is not an acceptance, is legal. So if they said, okay, we need time to think about, all the candidates, if we're interested, we'll let you know. So they may not even want to talk about salary until they've made a decision on who they want to bring on. And that's fine. The salary range, and really they haven't offered you a job, so you really shouldn't be talking about salary yet anyway. Once the salary offer comes, and I know I'm talking about this in the most formal way possible, and not all companies work in this formal capacity, but mostly it does. Once they send you a job offer and the dollar amount is that, technically you can negotiate, but I know it depends on the type of company you're at. If they send you a job offer for $20 an hour and you can write back and say, I thought 22 was what I was looking for. You can do that. But take it with a grain of salt, because we all have had jobs before and we know that there's a range of how that works. But traditionally, you get the job offer with a salary and then you negotiate. But sometimes towards the end, not every company is formal. They can be like, hey, based on what you've told me, we're willing to give you this. Do you want to accept it? and they'll want that informal yes, and then they'll talk to HR, and then the HR department will send you the formal yes. But the main thing is salary typically either comes at the end, or if it comes at the beginning, or that you're okay. Any questions on that? The final questions that you can ask, obviously, is, where are you in the hiring process? I always ask that. I need to know, am I the first person that you're interviewing, or am I the last person? Because if I'm the first person, that means I'm going to have to wait for you to interview everybody else. If I'm the last person, that means that I should hear fairly quickly from you. So it's definitely okay to ask that question, because you want to manage your own personal expectations on how long you're going to have to wait to hear back from those people, right? Right? Obviously, don't ask if you're going to hire me. Don't stalk them, in terms of, did you hire anybody yet? Did you hire anybody yet? Did you hire anybody yet? It is totally okay if they tell you over the next 2 weeks, we're going to be interviewing. So you should hear back from us. If 2 weeks go by and you don't hear back, then follow up. I do that all the time. And I've gotten jobs from following up. Maybe the HR person just hadn't got around to it, and they don't want to lose you, but they're so busy. And they're like, oh my God, thank you for following up. Yes, we're going to reach out to you. Just don't do it prematurely, because you don't want to come across that you're bothering them. But the only way to not do it prematurely is to ask on the front end on how long should you wait. Right? So how do we get you prepared for all this stuff? That's why we have the mock interviews. Hopefully it makes sense now. We tell people school is where you practice. It's not a place for you to get nervous. It's not a place for, you to be judged. It's a place for you to be assisted. This is why we have mock interviews, because sometimes you have to do a mock interview to say, okay, did I get that right? Was that a behavioral question? Did I ask it in the right way? Career services can give you feedback. What I love about career services is, especially at a technical school, is they work a lot with employers, right? Their job is to go out and find you jobs, right? So they may know the employer already. They can give you a heads up. Listen, Sarah talks a lot, so here's how you're going to handle Sarah. So this is why it's really good to work with your career services, so they can prepare you for those interviews. We've already talked about, what to do in terms of, doing your reconnaissance and knowing where you are. And, another thing, make sure that you don't go into an interview hungry. I know that sounds crazy. Let me tell you, it's not, I have an example for everything. I was interviewing a chief financial officer once. I see your hand in. A chief financial officer, a big time position, right? This person clearly was hungry, because her stomach was just gurgling or roaring. I don't know, maybe she ate broccoli. I don't know what it was, but it was so loud that everybody was uncomfortable. Now, we're all professional people, but you're not going to tell me that that's not going to throw you off. It threw us off, right? It was almost uncomfortable. You were trying to overtalk her stomach. It was just embarrassing. I was embarrassed for her. So I don't know if it was nervous bubbles or whatever it was, but you know your body, you know yourself, please. You just don't want that type of drama. And you may think, oh, that type of stuff doesn't matter. Y'all, we are human and we know it does matter. So, eat properly, make sure you dress properly, you smell properly, don't overdo anything. I try to tell people, be careful with what you have on, what you wear, don't not anything too loud that sounds loud, bangles on, none of that type of stuff. None of you guys have to worry about that. But sometimes you never know, because everybody's sense of taste is different. Everybody's sense of clean is different. And you don't want any odors, sweaty armpits. You don't want any of that detracting. And we call those things detractors. You don't want that in your interview, right? We know that stuff, right? We know. I know you guys know. All right. So let's get to the good stuff. Here's the live conference question. I want you to name 3 things you are looking for in a company. Don't say money, because we all looking for money. Yeah, we know. Show me the money.
But I'm
Besides
poor.
money, besides money, what are 3 things you're looking for in a company? This is for you. This is practice for you guys. If you haven't noticed yet, these are things that we want you really to be thinking about, because we want you to have a good experience. You just don't want to jump out. It's one thing to jump out there and to get a job. It's a whole other thing to jump out there when you're starting your career. That's more serious. It's like the difference between dating and getting married, right? You're trying to get married to this company, to this career, rather. So you want to really make sure it's the right career for you. So name 3 things you are looking for in a company or your career. 3 things. While you're jotting that down, I want to remind you that tomorrow is your midterm. Now, 1 or 2 things are going to happen. It all depends on how it goes. Typically, we have a guest speaker tomorrow. I'm going to see if I have one on deck. If the person is not available, then you'll just get out a little early. We'll just, talk a little bit about your resume that's due tomorrow, a little bit about a live conference question, and then I'm going to release you, because I know some of you use this time specifically to do your schoolwork. And so if you want to jump into your midterm right, at this time, I'm going to give you your time back. What does that mean? That means that we may not be on live session too long tomorrow. So come early. Come early. I don't want any of you to show up at 10:30 and we're not here. And and that's because, okay, go ahead, Francis. I'm just telling you now, midterm day is not the time to show up late. Show up early, because if we're not here, that means it's over. That means we didn't have a guest speaker and I released everyone to go start their midterm. Do you have to take the midterm during that time? No. So if that's what you're going to ask, no. You still have till Sunday to get it done. But again, some people like to use their time wisely, as they should, and do it during their school, the time that they've been allotted. So go ahead, Francis.
Yeah, my resume yesterday, I went in and I emailed it to you.
You got to put it in the assignment. Don't email me.
Okay, so put it in the assignment.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Put it in the, that's what you have to do. Remember, when you put stuff in the assignment, that's a legal record. I hate to get legalese on you guys, but when you turn in your assignment, that's almost like you're legally saying, I was here and I turned my assignment in. Like, you want to get away from, don't email your professors. Like, and that's just in life. Because email can be like, oh, I didn't get it. Yes, you did get it. You don't want that drama. Put it in the assignment. That's where it goes. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Because I can't put it in the assignment for you. So we don't want that drama. And also, your campuses do review class, like your dean has the option to come in and review what you've done, and they can't see work that you have not submitted. Any other questions? That's a good question, though, Francis. All right, y'all.
You.
Elijah, you have a question?
Yes, I do. So, long story short, I'm like working overnight right now, and they've been making me do like 12 hours. So I really didn't have time to do the recording. I'm like just got up, hopped on here and everything. So, I still have time to get it done, right? And
Yeah,
I
so the way
think
it
you said that.
works, you have until Sunday, right? So
Okay.
all the work that's due throughout this week, you always have until Sunday at 11:59 to get it done.
Okay, thank you. I remember you saying that. I just want a little bit of reinsurance. Sorry.
No. Hey, this is school. There's no wrong questions.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
No problem, sir. Yes, Kayla.
I just had a question about the mock interview, like scheduling it from yesterday. I don't quite understand that, I guess.
Sure. So in the assignment, it depends on what campus you're from. Every campus does it differently. That's why we had to put a list. What campus are you from? You're from where?
I'm in Port Charlotte, and I did look at the description of like how to do it, and I went on my dashboard in Canvas and went on career services, but it like there was nothing in there that said anything about scheduling a mock interview.
Okay, so get with your campus because what happens is career services at your campus is the one that's in charge of it. So just call your campus and talk to career services and tell them you were trying to set up your mock interview.
Okay, thank you.
And then just and then make sure you come back to class and put the time in. Well, I know that was last week, but so if you weren't able to do it, that's fine, but just make sure you physically do your mock interview because that's where the points really are, right?
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. No problem. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. All right. All right, y'all.